Hello. In my brief time today, I want to think about how we can harness the power of the central belief animating The Winter's Tale, that what is thought to have been lost can be found again. I begin, however, not with a story about Shakespeare, but about Samala, the language of the Ynez band of Chumash Indians, whose lands are located in what is now California's Central Coast region. In the late 1960s, a UC Berkeley graduate student named Richard B. Applegate took a part-time job that, in his words, changed the course of his life and the lives of many other people. Working on behalf of the Survey of California and other Indian languages, Applegate was tasked with cataloging boxes of materials gathered in the early 20th century by linguist and ethnologist John Peabody Harrington under the aegis of the Smithsonian's Bureau of American Ethnology. Harrington had spent over 50 years meticulously documenting more than 100 different Native American languages during a critical moment when many were on the verge of dormancy after centuries of colonial dispossession, massacre, and forced assimilation. In the face of this dire reality, Harrington approached his work with a feverish urgency. As he once wrote in a letter to his young assistant, Jack Marr, "You know how I look at this work. You and I are nothing. Will both of us soon be dust. If you can grab these dying languages before the old timers completely die off, you will be doing one of the few things valuable to the people of the remote future. The time will come, and soon, when there won't be an Indian language left in California. All the languages developed for thousands of years will be ashes. The house is afire. It is burning." While Harrington periodically sent reports back to his colleagues in Washington, D.C., his extensive notes and audio recordings were stored away in basements, warehouses, and even chicken coops throughout the country, remaining scattered and untouched for decades until after his death in 1961. From among the stacks and stacks of boxes that eventually ended up in the basement of Dwinell Hall at UC Berkeley on loan from the Smithsonian, Applegate's professor Mary Haas randomly assigned him to work on those related to Samala, also known by the Spanish missionaries as Inaseño. In the process of sorting through thousands of pages of Harrington's notes, Applegate quickly recognized how valuable these documents were for providing insight into the details of the language, as well as into the cultural practices, storytelling traditions, and histories of the indigenous peoples of California's Central Coast. As Applegate continued to decipher the notes, it also became clear to him that Harrington's informants understood that they were doing important work to protect their people's languages during a critical moment. Indeed, the single most valuable informant for Harrington was a woman named Maria Solares, who spoke with Harrington about her life and Chumash folkways in great detail over the course of 5 years. "Like the flower of this earth," she told him, "is our Samala language." Solares was well aware that she was actively preserving knowledge not just of the language, but of the land itself. Applegate did not stop at organizing and cataloging the boxes. In fact, he became so fascinated with Samala that he ended up writing his doctoral dissertation on the language. But this was no easy task. In the absence of living native speakers or any kind of key from Harrington, Applegate had to rely on sporadic translations of words and phrases scattered throughout the notes in order to reconstruct a grammar and compile a dictionary. After completing this dissertation project, Applegate published a handful of articles on Samala and other Chumash languages documented by Harrington and moved on to new projects, never thinking that his graduate research would be of interest to the descendants of the people who spoke the language he studied. More than 30 years later, however, Applegate was presented with an opportunity to shepherd Samala back to the community when leaders of the Ynez Chumash sought to revitalize their language in the early 2000s and turned to him as an expert and knowledge bearer. Over the next several years, Applegate collaborated with tribal members to create a comprehensive dictionary and pronunciation guide featuring photographs of the community and their ancestors. Soon after the Samala English Dictionary was published in 2007, the tribe continued their collaborations with Applegate to develop an apprentice program for learners and aspiring teachers of the language. It was not long after this time that Samala would make its debut on a professional stage, not in a play by a Chumash storyteller, but in a new multilingual adaptation of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale by Chicano playwright José Cruz González. Commissioned by artistic director Mark Bohr of the Pacific Coast Repertory, whose theater is situated on the ancestral lands of the Chumash peoples, González's Invierno was developed in consultation with the tribe's cultural director Nakia Zavala, along with Richard Applegate himself, who helped González, Bohr, and members of the cast to incorporate Samala and various elements of Chumash culture into the production. The element I wish to focus on in my brief time with you today is the lullaby. When the Samala language apprentices began working with children in their community, they noticed that tribal elders started to feel more comfortable speaking up and sharing what they knew about the language but had repressed during their time in Indian boarding schools and in California public schools. This newfound comfort prompted one elder to step forward during the tribe's annual culture day and share a lullaby. We were all in tears, recalls Nakia Zavala, because it was the first time we've ever heard a song like that before. Such embodied evidence of linguistic survival through a deep intergenerational connection between mothers and their babies confirmed for Zavala, a woman who traces her lineage 6 generations back to Maria Solares, that Samala, quote, was never put to rest. It lies within us. It's part of us, close quote. Given the tenderness and intimacy of this moment for the Santa Ynez Chumash community, it is especially meaningful that the first thing the audience hears from offstage in Invierno's prelude is a Samala lullaby sung by Paulina, a Chumash healer woman who functions as a storyteller, a bridge between past and present, and a voice of indigenous resistance and protection throughout the play. Shortly after singing this song, Paulina comes upon a contemporary young couple in a state of crisis, standing before an oak tree on a sacred site. Carved into the tree, the stage directions indicate is the shape of a woman, who we will later learn is Hermonia, the half-sister of Paulina. She died of grief after her husband Don Leon accused her of having an affair with his friend Don Patricio, banished their newborn infant Alegria, and thus caused the grief-stricken death of their son Maximino. The young woman, a Latina teenager named Allie, who has discovered that she is pregnant, attempts to hang herself on this tree, but is stopped by the young man, a light-skinned teenager named AJ, who struggles to process the news that his girlfriend has apparently, quote, been with somebody else. Just when the young man starts to strike the tree with a knife in anger, Paulina appears, identifying herself as Wind Woman, first in Samala, then in English. As she invites the distressed teens to join her on a journey back in time so that they can learn from the traumas that transpired on this land in order to begin healing themselves and changing their collective futures. She welcomes them and the audience into a space ungoverned by linear sense of time. Sometimes, Paulina says, there are tiny cracks, small openings, allowing the past to live differently in the present, and the present to become truthful because of the past, joining us together in ways we never thought possible. In recasting Paulina as the embodiment of the Samala language and its enduring survival, Invierno activates what Chicano historian Emma Perez describes as the decolonial imaginary, rupturing colonial timelines, worldviews, and stories to create space to live and think otherwise. It is here in the liminality between the no longer and the not yet, between tragedy and comedy, that Invierno draws upon the Winter's Tale's own ideas about resilience, revitalization, and repair to encourage us to listen for the gaps and silences that point toward ways of knowing and being that can bring about the futures colonization attempted to foreclose. As the plot of Invierno continues to unfold in the context of the ranchos of California in the years before and after the U.S. invasion of Mexico in 1846, a massive land grab that would result in the redrawing of the border as we know it today, the contemporary couple begins to recognize their deep connections to the past, and the lullaby with which the play opened becomes a refrain in key moments. This effect is perhaps most notable during the play's conclusion, when the statue of Hermonia, in this case carved into the sacred tree by a repentant Don Leon, stirs back to life. It is crucially not Don Leon alone who brings about Hermonia's reanimation, however. As the wind moves through the tree following the Samala blessing of the Wind Woman herself, Paulina and Allie begin to sing the opening lullaby in Samala and English, respectively, prompting Hermonia to join them in Spanish. Together, they form a chorus of women across languages, cultures, and generations that becomes symbolic of the reunion between Samala and its speakers and the reawakening of a language that was not, in fact, lost forever. If you would like to learn more about Samala, I encourage you to visit the website for the newly opened Santa Ynez Chumash Museum and Cultural Center. You can read Invierno in the second volume of The Bard in the Borderlands, which is available in print and open access. And the Borderlands Shakespeare Collectiva will be co-producing a new stage reading of the play with the Red Bull Theater under the direction of Mohegan artist Madeline Saya on October 20th, which will be available for streaming for the week after. A fuller account of Gonzalez's play and the revitalization of Samala is also available in my recently published book, Shakespeare in Tongues. Thank you so much.